This movie tells the story of Luis Antonio Vargas, a practical businessman who doesn't believe in true love. He thinks marriage is just like a business deal between two people. When Luis goes to meet the woman he plans to marry, he gets a big surprise. The woman standing before him looks completely different from the photo she had sent him. The woman, who calls herself Julia, explains that she didn't want him to choose her just because of her appearance. She hoped he would fall in love with who she really was inside, not just her looks. However, Luis is also keeping secrets. He never told her that he owns a successful business. Both of them are hiding important truths from each other. Luis takes Julia to his beautiful estate, and they get married in a local church. After their wedding ceremony, they go to sleep in separate bedrooms because Julia explains that she cannot be intimate with someone who is still basically a stranger to her. Luis respects her wishes and agrees to wait as long as she needs. The next morning, Julia brings Luis breakfast in bed, and he learns something new about his wife. She drinks coffee, even though in all her letters she had written that she preferred tea. Julia explains that her sister Emily used to read all her mail, so she had to lie about small things like her drink preferences to keep some privacy. The newlyweds begin living a quiet, peaceful married life as they get to know each other better. Eventually, Julia feels comfortable enough to invite Luis to share her bedroom, and their relationship becomes more intimate. Luis feels happier than he has ever been in his life. He shares his joy with his business partner, who becomes curious about Julia since she hasn't been seen around town much. Luis decides to invite his partner to join them at a theater performance that's coming to their city. During the play, something very strange happens. When one particular actor appears on stage, Julia becomes extremely upset and agitated. During intermission, she apologizes to everyone and rushes out of the theater. Luis follows her and discovers her talking privately with that same actor backstage. When he asks her about it later, Julia doesn't explain what happened. Instead, she tries to distract him with romantic affection. Some time passes, and Luis receives a letter from Emily, who claims to be Julia's sister. Emily is worried because she hasn't heard from Julia in a long time, and wants to know how her sister is adjusting to her new life. She's so concerned that she even contacted the local embassy to try to find out where Julia had disappeared to. Luis convinces Julia to write back to her sister, and she agrees to do so. One night, Julia has a terrible nightmare, and when Luis comes to comfort her, he notices several scars on her back. He doesn't ask about them, but he's clearly concerned. When Julia is ready to mail her letter to Emily, Luis offers to take it to the post office himself. Later, he takes his wife to the bank and gives her access to money for her personal expenses, as Julia wants to visit a tailor to have new dresses made. One day while walking through town, Luis encounters a man named Walter, who introduces himself as a private detective. Walter explains that he's engaged to Emily, and she asked him to come check on how Julia is doing in her new home. Luis tries to convince Walter that Julia is perfectly fine, but the detective insists he needs to see for himself. Luis feels he has no choice but to invite Walter to visit their home. When Luis returns home, he temporarily forgets about the detective because Julia thanks him in passionate ways for bringing her beautiful fabrics for her future dresses. Luis becomes curious about what Julia keeps locked in a wooden chest, but she won't show him and claims she lost the key. When Luis hugs her, he smells cigar smoke on her clothes. Julia admits that she tried smoking cigarettes. Later, Luis tells Julia that Walter will be coming for dinner, and she seems fine with this news at first. However, she immediately becomes very nervous afterward. Even the singing of her pet bird starts to irritate her greatly. The next day, the household maid finds the bird dead, which makes Luis begin to suspect something is wrong. His suspicions are confirmed when Emily herself arrives at his workplace. She wants to know what happened to her sister Julia. Although Emily received the letter Julia had sent, she's absolutely certain it was written by a different woman. When Emily shows the letter to Luis, he realizes with shock that his wife Julia and the real sister Emily are completely different people. Luis rushes home to find that Julia has disappeared, taking all her belongings with her. He breaks open her chest and discovers photographs of the real Julia along with her clothes. Luis goes to the bank and learns that his wife has withdrawn almost all the money from his account, leaving him nearly broke. Devastated and heartbroken, Luis begins drinking heavily and visiting questionable establishments. He truly loved the woman he knew as Julia, and now he's suffering terribly because she betrayed him so completely. In one of these places, Walter sits down with Luis. Walter tells him he's still searching for Emily's sister, and Luis asks Walter to help him find his missing wife. The two men work together to search for her and eventually discover that Julia is staying at a hotel. Luis and Walter check into the same hotel to keep watch. While Luis is distracted, Walter secretly takes Luis's gun and replaces the real bullets with blank ones, because he doesn't want Luis to kill his wife when he finds her. Luis finally tracks down his runaway wife at the hotel, where she's spending time with a man called Colonel Vors, who knows her by the name Bonnie. Luis confronts Bonnie just as she's writing a letter to her accomplice, the person who helped arrange for her to become Luis's wife. Through this letter, Luis learns the whole truth. Bonnie and her partner Billy had met the real Julia on a ship. When Bonnie learned that Julia was traveling to meet Luis for an arranged marriage, she told Billy about this opportunity. Billy arranged for Julia to have an accident, and then Bonnie took her place. Their plan was to rob Luis of all his money. Bonnie had given the stolen money to Billy and was preparing to leave, but she confesses to Luis that she began falling in love with him, which made her want to run away from the scheme. She also explains that when Luis forced her to write to Emily, she knew their deception would eventually be discovered. Luis realizes he has also fallen in love with Bonnie, so he cannot bring himself to kill her despite her betrayal. Luis spends the night with her, and in the morning, Bonnie tells him about her past life. She and Billy grew up together in an orphanage, both became actors, and eventually led to stealing from rich, lonely men. Colonel Vors was supposed to be Bonnie's next victim, but when he comes to see her the next morning, Luis sends him away. Louis tries to get rid of Walter, who is still searching for Bonnie in connection with Julia's disappearance. But it's not easy. Walter finds their new hiding place and makes it clear that he has also fallen in love with Bonnie. Walter and Louis struggle for the gun, and Luis accidentally fires it. Walter falls to the floor, and several more shots are fired before the detective stops moving. Bonnie sends Louis to the train station to buy tickets, while she deals with disposing of Walter's body. However, Walter suddenly comes back to life because he's actually Billy in disguise. Billy had known that Luis's gun was loaded with blanks, so he pretended to be shot. Billy wants Bonnie to return to their criminal partnership and rob Louis completely since he still owns his business, which he could sell to his partner. Billy wants that money and tries to convince Bonnie to help him. When everything is finished, Bonnie will have to kill Luis. Billy convinces her that Louis will never be able to accept her criminal past, and she will never fit into his respectable world. When Luis returns with the train tickets, he and Bonnie leave town together while Billy secretly follows them. One night, Bonnie wakes up from a nightmare and decides to try earning money in a different way. She teaches Louis secret signals that will help them cheat at card games. However, when they try to deceive experienced players, their plan is quickly discovered. Louis gets beaten up and thrown into the street, while Bonnie has to pay for their dishonest game with her body. After this terrible experience, Louis realizes he has no other choice but to get money legally. He decides to sell his share of the business so that he and Bonnie will have something to live on. Louis believes the police are hunting for him because he thinks he killed the private detective, so he keeps his money plan secret. Meanwhile, Bonnie,